Hey, good evening, everybody. Please let me know if you can hear me in the chat. Plus, minus, can hear me well and see me well? Can hear and see you well? Plus, minus. If there's any problems with the video, let me know. And then we're ready to go. So, I realized last time that I accidentally gave you maybe too difficult of a task by giving you all of the game classes to implement just at once. Of course, like before when we started with Python, we did this step by step. And now I just give you everything at once. So I think we should look and do these things step by step again, and not just try to do everything at once. So sorry for that. And now, if you, I see actually that two of you submitted the homework, which is great. So I'm really happy that you're sticking around. There's hopefully Rocket will also get back to this. So please get the template. I give you the template link already. Gave you the template link. So meanwhile, I will try to test out what did you submit as the homework, and we can look at some of the few issues maybe. So I gave you as a homework the implementation of all of this object-oriented class hierarchy, the class schema, and all of these details there. And from what I got back, let's see. So I got back from from Christiana. Let me see. I don't expect that something is really working. I'm just expecting to see how well you understand the code structure. So let's see what we have here. So this is a game state here, the static variable. So it's defined like that. So to define something within the games, to define new player here in the member variables, I think it's a little bit no, not so maybe it would work actually. It's just with working with the pointers, it's tricky. It's much safer to define them here. And if you're defining the public variables, then you actually don't need to define them up here. So basically, you could just leave them only if there's this hashtag there. But you will see that in a second. So it's not totally wrong. I think only there's not the semicolon here. It's stuff like that. So what else here? So the new direction, probably new direction would be also passed here in the constructor, of course, and then given here. So it would be not like just given from nowhere, right? Also, okay, here maybe if nothing happens, it could be like that. Okay. In general, like I think overall seems reasonable. At least I don't see like totally something wrong. So this seems fine. Of course, the encapsulation and things like that is not done properly. So for example, here, if I want to get access to the position, I will not get access directly magically. Nothing happens magically. So if I want to get access to this private variable hashtag position, I cannot just expect that this function will return position. It will not return anything. It will actually be void function, which is not correct. So in this case, we can have it like this. So this will be then the property of this position, right? And I could write the same thing, exactly the same thing in different ways. So if I would write this as a function, not as a property, position, right? Like that. The both ways would work. It's just the only difference will be how will I call this function. And also the same goes with the set property. So here, if I set the set property, as I say, nothing happens automatically. You always have to code all of these things. So position. And here, if I would then want to access them, it will happen. It will look something like this. Element is equals new element, and then element position, right? One way I would just access it directly like position something, right? Or another way would be to access it using the other function, like dot get position, right? And then it will be called like this. So you see, it's a little bit different. It's not exactly the same way. So you could either have it as a function or as a property. And either way, you need to program this yourself. It's not automatically given. So if you have any questions, type in the chat. I will briefly look at the questions also. Just now going over the code and explaining a little bit of what you submitted. So, and then here, these parts were the same as before, right? So let's look at the Everts code now. What do we have here? That's why it's useful to submit these codes, then I can comment on them. Otherwise, just like we cannot check what is the status. So, okay, so here, the singleton, I guess, is try to implement. And I'm not sure, like, would it really work like that? So you see, this is definitely not correct. So so first of all, this is a class name, right? Game state is a class name, and then here we want to have the access something in a static class variable. So we should then press set dot, and then in the dot we then use something like instance, like that. Then it would be actually an instance, and also this is not really protecting it properly, I think, because if there is nothing preventing me for doing this. So game one, new game, right? Game state, whoops, and then I do this again, and it will work. But singleton should not work. Singleton ensures that this set of variables is only accessible once, not many times. And the also this part of the writing. So, but no worries, we will go over these parts. So here, okay. Twice speed. So listeners, update super. I guess it works. Hopefully. Again, the way how you access position. If you define this as a function, then usually you do not define it the same name as variable. You would add the getter or add here something like that. Anyways, so I think you did a good job of at least attempting to do this. I know that. Okay, that's for the future because there was given that it will be your turn. Not sure exactly what you mean by that, but okay. Anyways, I think like it's not totally bad. It's okay. So anyways, please let me know if you're ready to do work with the template. So today we will try to explore more things and try to set up some visible elements on the game and actually make that the player is movable, hopefully. So let me check it. So it is template ready for work. Plus minus, let me know in the chat and then we will do the work. Okay, I see one plus. Let's wait for alerts as well. And we will work with this template, and then you will have something to improve upon at home. But yeah, so great. So just to reiterate, the way how we will make this game, this is not the only way how to make this game. You definitely in JavaScript, you can make it like in 100 ways. And in this way, how we're gonna make it, we'll try to explore different properties of of the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and jQuery. That is one of the reasons why we will kind of make it as it is. We'll try to make it also an object-oriented way, so it definitely can make it much more simpler. So, but we'll do it as we do it. So let's see. So we'll start with an element. So the element will be the thing that we're going to display on the scene. See in the line 135, we have jQuery object that is pointing to the scene, right? So if I try to now press on this small button on the right top corner with the Chrome symbol, it will open the Chrome browser and will automatically load the server for me. Remember, I told you that the HTML files with the JavaScript, you cannot just run directly from your file system. You need to kind of create a small server for it. And there was a couple of ways how to do that. If you have problems with that part, let me know in the chat. But if you start it, then it looks something like this. And if I now in the console, if I write J scene, you'll see that it gives me the pointer to this object. And if I highlight it, it should be highlighted. So let me see. So see, it highlights that the scene is in here, in this part. So basically, I'm selecting the jQuery object that now contains one variable inside the list. And this list is kind of specific object that in type of jQuery that I can manipulate, right? But it's not so important now to understand all of that part. So let's go back to the code. So just make sure that you can open it by using these small buttons on top, so that you have it running in the separate tab. And if you update it, you see that you don't have any errors or bugs, right? So then the element here, okay. So here for the element, we'll have a few properties. So again, we can try to define them in an object-oriented manner, okay? So let's try to do that. Okay, so here we could experiment by adding it. Okay, so position, and the position will be then by default null here, because I want to set it only in a constructor. Then also there will be the, instead of character, we could define it actually as a class. I mean, or we can left it as a character. But the thing is that we can render these things using the CSS, the styles, right? Not actually the emojis directly here. The style will contain the emoji. If you scroll up, you will see that I created a few styles with emojis, okay? So here we'll call this generic style. So this will be character with generic style class. So that's one. Then another thing is that I want to track which object is which on the scene. So I don't want to just remove all of the div elements, HTML elements from our scene, and then add them again every time when we have a new frame on the game, right? In the Python, we redraw the whole screen every time when we update all of the elements, right? In HTML and CSS, we can do this smarter. And one way how to do this would be using some kind of pointer identifier, some address or something like that. But in JavaScript, as far as I know, you don't have actually proper way how to access pointer address. But the pointers exist. There's the same rules as in Python or C++ or C or any other language. Only the thing is that I cannot really simply access the address of the pointer, and instead we will make our own kind of element IDs that we will count. So let's add here the element ID, and by default this is going to be 0. And then we will have also some kind of counter here, static element counter, like that. So idea that every element that we're going to create by constructor will have element ID, which will be increased every time. And this will be the common counter for all of the elements. Like if I will create like 1,000 rockets, then I will have 1,000 IDs, okay? And these will be counted at element counter, and they will never repeat. So as long as we don't run out of this tag, I mean, like as long as we don't overflow the integer, right? So it will be like like many millions until we can override that. So anyways, so here there will be the constructor. In the constructor, what we could do is probably all of the elements will be always positioned somewhere, right? So what we could do is that we can give the position here and then use it actually. So this position is position, right? That's one. Then another thing that probably should be done is also to override character probably. So here, so this will be then this character. And also we could probably set that if the character is not given, then we use default character. So if the character is empty, so basically this means this is empty, then in that case we can use, I mean, it's not empty, or maybe what we could do is define it like this. False by default is false. And if it's not false, if it's not empty, then we will use the one that's given in the constructor. Then the element identifier, so that's something that we count how many samples we have, right? So here what we can do is then write the static variable. So this is a very nice way how to use static variables, just for remember that singleton has a static instance, but here we have also a counter. So we know how many elements are on the stage, and they are never like, so there's never two elements with same ID. Of course, you could use some global variable as well, but this is much neater way how to do that. So, so element counter, and here we can use also the syntax from C++. This works in JavaScript. This is the same as in Python if you write like that, or it's also the same as if you would write something like element counter equals element counter plus 1. So this is all the same thing, right? Just two pluses means increase by 1. Also, two minuses means decrease by 1. So in C languages, it's common to use that. So then this element ID equals element and element counter. So like that. So we set element counter like that. Or these lines could be not in the same order, it doesn't matter. So that part, then we'll also update. Let's do two things more here. So one is that we could add draw function, and this will get the JScene and do something here. And then we also can have the update function, delta time, like that. So yeah, you can add those right now as an empty, just do nothing now. So I will drop these lines in Jamboard and wait for you to catch up so we can move on. But also let's add some test code below. So on the slide number 2, I'm now dropping the code, and the test code is following. So what you need to do here is to have the let dummy. So let's have a dummy element, new element, like that. And then the position should be a given. So the position will be new position 2D, and here we'll have like 0, 0. And then the second will be the character, which we can set as wall, for example, like that. And if it works, then if I press save and now go to the here, to the Chrome, and then right here dummy. See, I get the element without any errors. Everything's working, and element ID is 1 here. So if you get so far and you don't have problems, then everything is right. If something is not understandable or you have some problems, then please write in the chat. So I will wait for you to finish so far. So I'm done so far, plus minus, and I will wait. So I see 1 plus, but I will wait for both of you to catch up because I want to make sure that we succeed today by creating a few elements on the scene and making them interact with each other. Okay, so great. We have 2 pluses. I really hope that you don't have errors now because, as I said, you need to check that you don't have errors. If you have errors, then please type those errors or copy something in the chat so I can help you out. Sometimes students just copy the error and then I can help them out by predicting where the problem is. So anyways, so this part is done then. Then the other part will be the wall element. So the dummy code, what we can do is like select out this part of the code, then press, I think it's called Control and slash like that, and then you can comment it out, or you can just delete it out. This is just for the testing purposes, right? So then let's construct the wall. So constructor, and then here we need to give the position probably, and here in the super we give the position, and then here let's add wall. So we will have the wall element like that. And again, I think that's about it for the wall here. So the wall is really easy one, right? Then for the other elements, maybe it will be a little bit more difficult. Now, don't touch the movable elements, just let's fix with the immovable elements. So the wall now is also on the slide number 2. And please make sure that this part is also okay. And then we should add the wall to the screen, okay? So let's try to add the wall to the screen. So we have elements and we can elements push. So not append. In JavaScript, we don't have append, we have push. So this is again different kind of function. Unfortunately, the name is different. So here we can then have the new wall, okay, then new position. Again, remember that in JavaScript and C languages, we need to add the operator new to create a new object. In Python, we can just like write with the large letter the class name and as a function, and it will be actually an object. So here, this is a new object of wall with the first parameter new position. And the position, let's try to add the position 2 by 2. So some position down below. So let's add that one. And we should also make the kind of game loop. So I mean, it's part of the game loop. Let's just make the part where we draw the elements. Okay. So the drawing the elements, what we will do is for left element, and here I want to do the for each type of thing. So to do the for each effect in JavaScript, you need to use not in but of so elements. So if you use the operator in here, if you would write it like for let elements, so the let is actually kind of what it means is that please give me this variable only for this part of the scope. So scope means from this curly bracket till this curly bracket. If I will try to use the element outside of the scope here, So if I will try to use element here, it will give me error. But as long as I'm in these brackets and I use the operator let, it will work. So, but if I would write the for loop in this manner, because this would be naturally what you would write in Python and in some other languages, unfortunately, what would happen is that you would iterate through the properties of element. I mean, like, what you could do is do following. So if you create the wall here and then select the first element of wall, then you would iterate through all of the properties inside of object like position, character, element ID, and things like that. So this is improper. In operator do not work as you would expect in JavaScript. So never use in a operator in most cases. So either use off operator like that, or you have another option how to do the same thing. Probably you understand that you can do this exactly the same thing in another way, like this. So let me show you what I mean. So I 0 I. So this is exactly how you write this in C, C++. So elements length E++. So we are going through all of indexes from I. So I will go 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on till the element's length. So, and if you have that kind of loop, of course, you understand that you can write now element equals element I, and this would work exactly the same way as this part of the code. So let me check that this is understandable. We don't need to use both of these codes. I will add these both codes to the Jamboard, but you should choose one of them. So is for loops clear plus minus, and now the question is the for loops clear or not? Plus minus, and if there is something not clear about the syntax, please then write exactly which part is tricky, and I can explain more. So the idea is that we want to go through this list. So there is a list. Remember, this is the way how you define the array or some kind of list or many elements inside that array, right? And now I'm adding just one element of wall here, and then I'm going through those elements, right? So there is one way to doing like that. Another way is doing like that. So I see one plus, but don't be shy to ask questions. So also, we could write using some temporary variable like this, for example, wall, let wall, and then push it here. So this is exactly the same code as before, just with more variables. So this would be more debuggable. It's actually always smarter to add more variables than just try to write everything in spaghetti script with large like functions and functions. So for example, if I would like to write it in many separate variables, I could write it like let wall position equals new position, right? And don't be confused about the syntax, because many languages actually requires you to add before the variable names some kind of operator. So now the operator is let operator. Sometimes also in JavaScript, the older days, you would use the operator var, like variable, right? If you would use the operator var, this would work exactly the same way. It's just that the JavaScript is updated now, and you don't use any more var. You use let now nowadays. So there are a few differences actually, but they are not that important now. So I will add these parts to the Jamboard so you can just look at them later and uh, carefully like try out if you want. But now let's try to use only one of them. So let's try to use the simpler one. Okay, this one. So I will delete this one. I added to the Jamboard the other one. So here, very simple stuff. So now we're going to the element and calling the draw function. So again, because we don't care what kind of type is element, because this is a polymorphism, right? Object-oriented programming. So, and then we are giving the JScene there. We could give the JScene as a global variable, but that would not be like really properly object-oriented manner, it would be better to pass the pointer to the JScene object using this kind of method. So you should add the element row and pass the JScene. If you want, you can add multiple walls. Like for example, I could define new wall. By the way, if I'm using wall position again, then it gives me the warning that I'm reusing some variable. What I could do is delete let, and now reusing it properly. And now if I'm setting as 3.3, now the only problem with this code is if you know already that we are now losing the pointer, right? But the good news is that pointer was added to the elements list here, and that's why it's not lost. I can access the first wall by doing this. Oh, sorry. So first wall I can access by elements, zeroth element, right? So this is the first wall, and the second wall is in this part. And of course, the second wall is also this variable. So this is exactly the same as just wall, right? They are stored in that list inside the array of the list here. So they are stored there. Okay, that's great. By the way, also in JavaScript, sometimes you can write list as new array like that, and this would also work. New array, or you could add it like this. It doesn't matter. So okay, so I hope you're so far done. I will drop this part of the code also to the Jamboard. You can add, by the way, I added those walls just by copying and changing a little bit of the position from 2.2 to 3.3. But you can do as you wish. You can even write the push new wall position inside one line. It doesn't matter at this moment. So are you done so far? Are you done so far? So far we added, we are trying to draw these wall elements in the JScene object. So the question is in the chat, plus minus. If you have some error, please type in. Again, meanwhile, while you're trying to catch up, I will remind you that this $sign is actually calling the jQuery object. So this $sign means calling jQuery function, or basically jQuery object. So this is creating jQuery object, and this jQuery thing, this is a library which is included on top of this file. On top of this file, you will see that there is an external link from jQuery library, and that's why this $sign works. If I don't add that line, the $sign will not work, and nothing will work regarding jQuery. So, and also, the hashtag scene, I will remind you what it means is that I am selecting element by ID, where ID is equals scene, inside HTML. So this line of the code is really important to understand. So is that there is this external library called jQuery. So let's go up. We already talked about this. See, in this line, we have the jQuery library. Then inside our HTML part, so we have the JavaScript and HTML part, right? We have the kind of the visual part and the coding part, right? So the visual part is here. And the visual part, you see that we have a div element. So this is a box element. In a box element, we have scene by ID. So there's ID scene, right? And in a jQuery language, if I want to select something that is ID, I use the hashtag. I know that this is a little bit confusing because the hashtag is also used in JavaScript for private variables, but it doesn't mean that this is the same thing. This is not the private variable. This is actually the accessing the, this is called the CSS selector. So CSS selector So if you want to look up more about how to select elements on the HTML page and modify them, then you should look at CSS selectors, and then you can do this with jQuery. By the way, you could make your own plugins for the Chrome or some other browser where you open your favorite websites, and in the console part, so let me show you what I mean by that. You could play with that yourself at some time, so that here in the console part you could import the jQuery and then like select all sorts of things here. So for example, I would select like body tag, then append something here. So append, for example, let me see, what could I append? Div class element alien. I guess I could do that. See, and the alien appears here on the bottom. So you can imagine that by using jQuery, you can modify all sorts of things in your websites, or also make a plugin for Chrome. For example, you don't want to do something manually, you can automate everything with jQuery as well. So now if I refresh the page, because now a little bit uh, like modified it, but it works directly in the console as well. So now let's go back to the code. I was trying to explain why this matters. So okay, so we are passing this pointer to the object in our HTML to this element draw, and now we need to do something with it. So here in this JSON code, let's try to make something happen. So first of all, let's write then let j element. So there will be the also like a copy of our element, but it's like, I mean, like there will be just a visual div element on HTML page which would represent the element class. Okay, so this will be J element, and initially it will not exist, and we will add it if it's not existing. Okay, so how to do that is following. So the JSON, so we'll try to find it first. Do we have this element somewhere already existing? So find, so we'll try to find it in the scene. So find, and again, we will use the jQuery selectors, and see I'm using these specific types of quotes. See, they are like over the tilde sign. So quotes above tilde. So this is in the top left corner of your keyboard. Top left corner of keyboard. So there you have these types of quotes. And inside these quotes, we will add this kind of like that. This will be the ID of element, and here we will use this notation with the dollar sign and these curly brackets. And this is exactly the same as in Python, the f strings. Remember f strings, where you can enter the variables inside the string. So this is a string literal, and here this also works in JavaScript. So here this will work then this dot element ID like that. And we are trying to select the element by this string. So what we are now doing, we are looking for the div, which is with ID. It's actually not a div, it can be anything, by the way. So ID and the element will be something like that. So we're looking for this kind of element in the JSON. So it's not just anywhere in HTML, but exactly in JSON object. So, and of course, initially it doesn't exist, right? So how to check? So if you select anything in jQuery, any element in jQuery, so in that case, you need to check if it exists. So, and you can check it by length. And if the length equals to, for example, 0, and by the way, you can use 2 equal signs, and this means equals to 0. And if you use 3 equal signs, it means also matches the data type. So if it's a string or integer, it will check also if it's exactly the same data type. If it's not the same data type, then it will return false. But we can leave it actually as a 2 equals as well. I just don't like that it highlights this line as wrong. So that's why I'm adding the 3 equal signs. But this is exactly the same as 2 equal signs. You can play around with this in JavaScript. Again, this is one of the weirdness of JavaScript. With 2 equal signs, you can get really strange effects when you're comparing the integers with strings, for example. So here, let's say, so J element, if it didn't exist on the scene, we can create one ourselves, okay? So how to create it is the following. So we would create a new jQuery object, which is not added to the actually the body or HTML, right? Here again, there is another weirdness of JavaScript. Like, of course, we can use this part of as a CSS selector, or we can also use it actually as a like template for building elements. So in this case, we're going to use it as that. So what we will do is here is write actually HTML element div. So and div will be. By the way, please use the again the tilde quotes. If you use these small specific quotes, then it's easier to write here. So now I create a div element here, and then I write ID. And ID, of course, will be what I have above here. So element, and I will copy this part of the code here, like that. And then the last thing is I need also to make that it's somehow visible, right? There is some kind of class or style or anything like that. So what you do this element, and also we'll add the specific class of the element, right? We have the character. So this character. So the specific class, what it means is that if you look at the code above, there is a CSS style code where we define how the div element with the class element looks like. So it looks like a absolute position element. So it can be positioned by top and left properties, right? And the this part of character, if we see by default, is generic. And if you create a wall, then this is a wall. So we want to have the kind of emoji of a wall attached to that position, which is at the element. So you could also make your own styles, like for example, create that this div box is red or green or something like that. And you can define all of that in the CSS file text about this part of the code. So, and now we're creating this div element here, but this div element is not yet attached to the JC. It doesn't exist anywhere. It just exists in this part of the code, and it's not visible to the user. To make it visible to user, we need to add it actually to the HTML, to the body, or to some element in HTML. So in this case, we're going to add it to the scene. So append. Again, here we have different kind of function name. So this is like we had in so there is actually append, there is also before, after. There's a lot of kind of functions that you can try to manipulate HTML directly. So again, all of these elements with J in the front, I specifically defined them as such because they are jQuery instances. So all of the jQuery instances have all of the jQuery functions. And we cannot go all through all of the jQuery functions. They are like so many. But the idea is that all of them are used to manipulate the HTML. So in this case, first we manipulate by finding an element in HTML, right? And now we're appending elements. So we're adding in the element in the div of the C. So what this means is please add J element, which is actually the div. So div ID ID element one to div ID C, right? So this line means following. So I want to add that div to another div that already exists. So so that's done. So we are adding that. So so either we already have it or we add it, and then next time when we call draw, we don't need to add it anymore. So that's good. Then let's make that we can change the position. So J element element position. So I mean it's CSS. So this is actually the kind of visible element. That's why we are using CSS. So and now let's override CSS. We can use these curly brackets here and override multiple elements. So curly brackets means dictionary, basically. Curly brackets also means the scope. So in this part of the scope, again, something a little bit confusing. So here in the lines from 142 to 145, this part means scope. So this is exactly the same as tabs in Python. So this part, like when you have these curly brackets, like this small guy here and this small guy here, this means that this is like in the Python tab, right? And in this part where there is a curly brackets used inside a function call, this is not anymore the scope. This is dictionary actually. So this is really confusing probably if you see this first time, but you get used to it. So top. So this will be the top part, and we will convert this to the integer by using parse int. So this is like math and math and floor function. So we're converting floating point variables to the integers. So this position y multiplied by 20. Let's see what happens here. I hope this is fine. So then we add another left position x by 20 like that. And now it should work, hopefully. Yes, it works for me at least. So, so. Okay, I'm dropping this part to the Jamboard as well. I realized that in this small piece of code there might be some things that are not understandable. And if something is not understandable, then please try to write this in the chat. What exactly is not understandable, and I can explain more. So in slide number 3, now I dropped this part of the code. And if I show you how it looks on the screen now, let me show you how it looks on the screen. So you should see two wall elements in such a pattern here, and they are created the first time you run the kind of the for loop those functions. So that's here. Okay. So now let's transition back to the code and wait for you to achieve the same result, and then we will try to make some changes so we can modify something here. So I mean like fly around or move some object around. So we will try to get to that moment as well with the code that we're doing. So let me ask in the chat, is draw ready plus minus? If minus, then please try to explain what is not working. If you have some error appearing, then also please let me know. All of those things would help to learn together how to do these things better. Okay, I have 2 pluses, so that's great. So I will try to I will not implement all of these things. We will have to implement some few things at home, but here a lot of things will be given to you. So for example, what we could do next is to create that we expose the position to outside role, because now the position is kind of, okay, actually we don't need to expose them. I think, no, we need to expose because the private variable will not be accessible from the child variable. So that's why I need to expose them. So to expose them, I need then to write set position And here we can add pause like that. This hashtag position pause like that, and get position, and then here return this hashtag position like that. So now I exposed the position to the outside of the world or the child classes, because the hashtag variable will not be accessible to the child classes. So I'm adding these getters and setters. They are called getters, setters. So this is the embedding, what is called uh, encapsulation of the variables in object-oriented manner. So that's what we have here. So the position and stuff like that. So okay, so that's here. Um, I'm added that to the Jamboard as well. But let's move now here to the movable element. So here for the movable element, what we could do here is for a constructor. Again, we need to have the position, right? Position. We should also have the character, probably. We could again define it as false by default. Then here we should pass all these things here, position, character, right? We could catch it also here probably, or we could leave it as it is most likely now. Okay, so that's done. Then let's add here the some of the functions. So let's have the left function. What arrows do we have actually? Yeah, left and right we have. So left, and this means that I will call this position x minus 1, right? And right means exact, or we could actually write it in a C++ manner, right? Minus or plus like that. So this will be a C++ type, right? So like that. So we have the element here. We could add also the elements here. So let's call this as a let this will be the movable, or let's call it just maybe a player. Later you should make it properly, right? Because this will be not the full player. So player, player, and this will be, we could actually call it directly from player, or maybe it will not work. So movable element, new movable element, sorry, new movable element, and here the position, new position. Let's add the position somewhere in the center of the game, 5,5. So we have a player. We add the player to the elements, push to the player elements here. So now it's like that. And it appears also on the screen. So if I show you how it looks like now, like that, and if I go back to the code, so movable element, and you have options to move it left and right. By the way, so far the code, what we added is very little. I added literally just a few lines of code. Nothing dramatic has changed right now. So I'm adding this to the Jamboard as well. So let me ask, what is movable element done plus minus? And also, did you add it as a player with these two lines? So let me know in the chat. And I added all of this part of the code also to the Jamboard slide number 3. And then we will do the last thing, was actually try to move the element around the scene. So right now in the scene, we have just this white box because the actual player class is not yet implemented, right? So you will need to implement player class yourself at home. So you'll add, like, the kind of just a picture of a player, and So it's not nothing actually too difficult. And then I mean the emoji of a player. So okay, we've done so far, so great. That's great. So then to change the position, what we could do here is to add player. So the left call and then player right call. Right. So right now, because the let is in this scope, I hope that it will work. If it will not work, then we will need to move this as a global variable, the player. But now, hopefully, this will work. So I added to these two things, but it will not work in a sense that even if I do this left or right, I'm not updating actually the position. So the draw is updated only here. So to update actually the draw part, what we need to do is to create some kind of a game loop. And the game loop is a little bit difficult to create in JavaScript because I cannot just make some kind of like for loop that is, or while loop, which is blocking the user interface. I cannot just block the user interface. So instead, what we do is follow it. So what we can do is so let, this will be the main. So this will be main game interval and call something that is called set interval. And we could actually write it in two parts. It will be not that confusing. So we can write here let's add here so this will be called the function uh, main game loop. So this will be, again, you see, again, something different in the Python, I mean, in the JavaScript. Again, we have a new keyword called function. So in JavaScript, it's sometimes really confusing because you can write functions without the keyword function in class. But if the function is not inside the class, but outside of the class, then you add the function here. So unfortunately, like that. So then here, set interval like that. And now we should define by the way, you see I'm giving the pointer to the function. I'm not giving these brackets like that by not doing that. I'm giving a pointer to the function to the set interval. Now I'm setting how often should I redraw the scene. So what we could do is add that we will redraw 10 times a second, so 100 milliseconds. So this means that redraw, so call main game loop every 100 milliseconds, like that. So let me see if it works. Yeah, it works. So this is the way how you create the kind of these game loops that are repeating in JavaScript. You cannot just write as a Python where we had the main game loop where we listen for the keyboard changes and things like that. In JavaScript, you create kind of like these event handlers. So this is actually observer pattern. Remember we talked about observer pattern. So now we are giving the function pointer to this set interval and saying, please repeat this function every 100 milliseconds. And now if you implement this correctly, I will drop this also to the Jamboard. So I will drop in this to the Jamboard, to the slide number 4. And then I will show you the result. And then you'll be ready to do the homework. So if I show you now the result, it looks something like that. If I press the button, see the object moves in left or right direction very nicely. If I press the button very quickly twice, it will move faster, see? So, and why actually the animation happens is because we specifically designed that CSS, the styles, are animating the two properties of the elements, which are the uh, what was it? So that was top and left, I think. So if we remove that CSS part of the code, then it will jump like in Python. So what I mean by that is I will show you. So if I go inside the CSS here, and remove that part of the style. So here in the element transition, see you have the transition actually. By the way, I could do this actually in this way as well. By selecting this small element, it gives me the style here somewhere. Where is the style? So this is generic actually, sorry. Okay, element here, the style. If I press this button and says that I don't want this style, now I press the buttons, you see it's jumping. There's no animation anymore. So the animation happens only if you have this property enabled with a transition. Now it gives you nice animation between the positions. So it automatically calculates the difference between positions, and it says that in 1 second you should move by this position. So anyway, so that's about it for today. I really hope that you get this moment where you can do this in your code. And for homework, you will need to create the player class, and you will need to add the wall elements, and basically make sure that the player works in both directions. And you also implement up or down, hopefully, and that the walls are placed in the right positions. And maybe you could add also even the aliens. So I will create the kind of visual that I want to see after the result of this code, and you will submit the code as homework. And if you have any other questions, then just feel free to write me directly, and I'll try to help you out, because at the end we need to make sure that this works, and learn how to do this yourself, because later you will have tasks actually in JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and you should not only be able to copy my code, but like think how to do this yourself. So you feel free to experiment with the code, to try to change things, understand how they work, and write if you have some questions, and we'll meet next week. Okay, bye bye.